Hey everybody. This week, instead of a normal Doofcast episode, we're sharing with you a discussion of Neal Stephenson's newest novel, Termination Shock, with me and on-staff Neal Stephenson expert Daniel Freeman. Your regular programming will be back next week, with the Doofcast covering the Wheel of Time TV show that aired last year. For now, join me and my brother in nerding out on Termination Shock. Hello, friends. Welcome to Freeman Bros. I'm Matt Freeman, and this is my brother Daniel.
Hello.
Daniel, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about Neal Stephenson's Termination Shock, a novel that we both had a chance to read before it came out. So here we are reviewing it 92 days later.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable because it probably took most people about 92 days to read it, right?
Yeah, totally. Actually, what's funny is I probably had it an additional 92 days before that even. So we've really had this book in our pockets, literally, for about 6 months. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Neal Stephenson.
Yeah, sorry, Neal Stephenson. But and also thank you.
Yes.
And just general expressions of inadequacy. But here we are to talk about this book. You know, honestly, Daniel, we released our discussion of his previous book, Fall, like as soon as we possibly could, and it turned out that the net result was just no one listened to it because nobody had read the book. And so I figured this time it would actually make some rational sense to wait. Might have waited a little longer than we needed to. But
we're catching the second wave, if you will, the termination shock of coverage ending on his novel, if you will. To extremely strain.
Exactly. I'm totally there with you. So I think we'll start with the non-spoiler discussion. Yeah. And then we'll clearly indicate when we moved on into spoilers. So let's just begin. Daniel, what did you think of Termination Shock?
I really enjoyed it. I like this style of this brand of Stephenson where it's like he kind of started this with the sort of airport thriller Stephenson with Reamdy, I think. Which is actually kind of funny because I think Zodiac was also sort of in this vein. But it's a thriller novel. It's fun at the same idea. It has really cool sci-fi ideas, and also all of the characters are great. Like what more can you ask for in a novel than just a delightful chunk of ideas and delightful characters interacting with each other and a really cool kind of speculative slice of how the future might look.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. I feel like this is my favorite book of his out of the last several. If I was going to compare this to one of the books, it would probably be Kryptonomicon. Kryptonomicon's scope and ambition is much wider, but in terms of what it brings you, it brings you this kind of, like you said, delightful characters. Everything is completely buttoned down on the character and narrative side. I actually really appreciate that he's doing near-term sci-fi in a way that he hasn't usually. Like usually it's either been like sort of, wild, Diamond Age stuff or Snow Crash stuff or even wilder than that, or it's been something kind of historical, and this is really just like 5 or 10 years in the future, basically. They never actually say what year it is.
Yeah,
which is funny. And I really enjoyed it. I think what I enjoyed most about it, or where I most noticed what I would call like Stephenson's growth and improvement, is in the characters specifically, because there's always been this thing with Stephenson where his characters are so cerebral and intellectual that
shape rotators, if you will.
And they're shape rotators, and even the Shafto archetype that he writes about, where they're basically very hands-on, proactive people. They have this kind of sardonic quality to them, where the text distances you from anything horrible that's happening in a way that makes it so that you never quite feel the sadness. And in this book, there's at least 1 or 2 moments where Stephenson just allows it to be sad and shocking and whatever, more less like he would normally do it, more like you kind of expect from a more mainstream storyteller who just tells normal stories for normal people. um, and I liked it. I liked it. We'll talk about the specific stuff I'm talking about when we get to the spoilers. But yeah, I this is like this is a big recommend for me. This is one of those ones where I feel like a lot of the memes from the story are going to sort of be absorbed into the zeitgeist, and people are going to be using the memes without even necessarily realizing that they came from here. Just like all the snow crash memes have taken over the entire culture. Yeah, what else can we say in a non-spoilery way?
Yeah, that's kind of the quirky thing about these character-driven stories is that it's like we've sort of exhausted all of the spoiler-free stuff already, unfortunately, because it's like everything that is delightful about this story is like specifics of characters and specific plot beats and his particular vision of this near-term future.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk like dust jacket level spoilers. I do find it funny that the book is advertised as being like, I've seen multiple places where it says the story is about a Texan billionaire who embarks on a climate change reversal project. And it's like, look, this is not I don't think this is a spoiler because I'm just correcting the marketing, which is that the book is not about that guy. Like, that guy is a minor character. He shows up a few times, like 3 times. He's not a main character. He's not a point of view character. He's sort of behind the inciting incident, but that doesn't make him the main character. The story is indeed about climate change and about geopolitics, but I just found it very kind of annoying that the book was marketed the way that it was.
Yeah, this has happened, I feel like, repeatedly for how Stevenson novels are marketed, and I think it's sort of it's a clash of how Stevenson tells stories versus how stories are typically told, which is maybe that his stories are more of like they're more of like flirting around with an idea taken seriously than they are like, intro, rising action, climax, falling act. Like, not that he doesn't like employ the usual tools of storytelling. It's just that the ways I find his books delightful are not the ways in which he's executing in like the typical story fashion. It's more in how he is engaging with ideas and how he is having people react to those ideas. Like, that's where all of the fun lives for me. And when you try to sell that as like, a bookstore, you got to put something on the dust jacket, which is going to be disappointing because it's like it's not about that. It's not about the billionaire trying to. That's not the story's about.
Yeah, he's really good at writing scenes, and I don't think he even really cares that much about writing what you would typically call a plotty narrative. And I think I'm beginning to think of him as like the ultimate gardener, because even other writers who I think of as gardeners, they will try really hard to make everything come together in the end. And very often Stevenson will just be like, yep, that was the involvement of this character in these events. The end. And now this book is actually not quite that bad. Like, I feel like we got actually some pretty like thematically satisfying closure for all of our characters. So all that sort of criticism / damning with faint praise I just said, that I actually think Stevenson's didn't do that here. I think this book ends correctly from a narrative point of view.
And maybe it's sort of like, I would still love it if he hadn't, but it does sort of elevate this as it seems like he's paying more attention to that this time around.
Yeah, there's a couple choices that we'll talk about like in the climax where I feel like maybe younger Stevenson wouldn't have made that choice, and the consequence would be that it felt maybe even more realistic in a sort of boring how would that actually go sense, but much less satisfying in like a narrative catharsis sense. Cool. Yeah. The I guess I really there's so many specific like technology things where I'm just like, no, that's not really going to happen, is it? And then you think about it and you're like, oh my God, he's right. That's totally going to happen. I specifically am referring to like stuff that he imagines we will start doing as climate change encroaches.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, there's another thing. Okay, before we move into spoilers, last thing before we move into spoilers, and then we can sort of use this to bridge into spoilers.
Yeah.
Daniel, how weirdly personally invasive do we want to get in our discussion here?
Oh, right. This is the whole thing about how he almost certainly just followed our family around at a distance with a long lens camera and
for 30 years.
For 30 years, and just recorded everything about our family, and then wrote a novel about it.
Yeah. So, yeah, the non-spoiler way of saying it is that like every setting in this book almost is a place that we've either lived for a time or like have incredibly deep and important family roots, including all these like international settings.
Yeah.
And then there's just a whole bunch of other little contingent plot details where I'm like, why is this in here? No one knows about this, but this is like really relevant to our family and like our family's history. Several things like that. So it was weird. It was
super weird.
And I kept turning the page and there'd be more, and it would be even more weird.
Just to give even more context. I got the book first. I read the book first, and I had to restrain myself from telling you how many of these things kept coming because of how weird it was. Because I didn't want to, I couldn't even communicate the surprise properly. So I just had to stop myself after like the third time and be like, you know what? He's just going to have to run into it when this happens again, because it's actually uncanny.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when I read it, I would mention it to you, and then you would, react non-committally, and then there would be something even more shocking 50 more pages later. So I don't really think that Neal Stephenson was spying on us, but I also don't know why he chose to transect this particular slice of the world that just so happens to line up so well with
perhaps
this book.
The pessimistic read here is that if you take the arc of humanity in the latter 20th century, there is a projection down to a cluster of humans that does transect all of these things, and it's not as rare as we like to think we are. But also it's actually a pretty niche sub-community of Earth history for all of these things to line up in exactly the way they did. So I don't know. I can't explain it, Matt.
I mean, I think honestly it's a naturally dramatic series. Okay, we're gonna have to move into spoilers now.
Sorry, everyone.
All right, everyone. Thank you. I really do recommend the book, especially if you're a Neal Stephenson fan. I think it's actually better than Fall, which we liked as well.
It's a very different book.
Yeah, Fall was extremely ambitious. Ultimately, kind of too ambitious.
Liked Fall.
I like Fall too, but this is much more of just like an enjoyable, good story with good characters. And with that, we're moving on into spoilers.
All right.
Yeah. So I guess to finish the thought that I was having there, like the history of like Dutch involvement in Southeast Asia, for example, is just really interesting.
Yeah.
And you can imagine someone like Neal Stephenson finding out about this and doing one of his deep dives and just being like, oh my God, that's amazing. Oh, I know, I'm going to write about the involvement of this one particular guy and his family, this Dutch guy, and his involvement in Indonesia, Indonesian culture and politics, and how would that go? And what's funny is that doesn't even sound anything like our family's real history. It's just the fact that we have all these ties to Indonesia, and we have all these ties to
coastal Texas.
And all of and a lot of the sort of industries that are referenced either directly or adjacently in the story. I think that's as weird as we want to go, honestly. But like it was weird, like how much of the book deals with these specific locations where we either grew up or but mainly where we grew up. Anyway, so that we're done with that now.
It was weird. It was real weird, y'all. Just imagine someone wrote a book set in every place you had been for the past 30 years of your life.
Yeah. And especially if you kind of think of yourself as having had an unusual life.
Yeah.
All right. Who's your favorite character, Daniel?
Oh my God. That's a hard question. Can it be a tie?
Yeah, it can be a tie.
It is a tie between Lax and Red.
Well, of course it is. Yeah. I mean, Lax and Red are great. Like Lax and Red are just great Neal Stephenson characters. Saskia is also a great character. They're all great characters. They're all extremely fun characters, and they're all different from each other, and I love all of them. I think maybe Rufus is my favorite though. The Rufus, the thing that got, like, nothing in Stevenson has ever got me as hard as the Rufus backstory, where, well, first of all, it's just delightful storytelling because there's a plane coming into land in Houston, and then a bunch of feral hogs smash through the airport barrier and cause the plane to crash. And then a man with an assault rifle shows up to get revenge upon the pigs.
Yeah.
And then we jump into the backstory of the man with the assault rifle, and it's horrible. Like, the thing is, like, it's so horrible. Like, his poor, like, and this hits me especially hard, I guess, because I have little children. Like, one of his little daughter was eaten by a giant feral hog, and then it ruined his life, and then he basically swore vengeance upon hogs, and then like went in Stevenson fashion, like, came to recognize all of these similarities between his life and, like, Moby Dick, and how the pig was his white whale, and how like he was kind of aware of the fact that this was an obsession that was not healthy for him, but that didn't mean he could stop because he was just so hurt by it.
Yeah.
And then you finally catch up with the present, and he finally kills the specific pig that killed his daughter.
Yeah.
And then just immediately breaks down sobbing. And I just like that short story just killed me. And I was like, oh my God, I know I'm in for a ride.
It's actually perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's the best part of the book, because it's not like there's not a lot of great stuff in there, but I was like, this piece by itself, like, makes this book worth it.
I 1,000% agree. Yeah. Like, it's definitely like the best like elevator pitch, who is this character, to their core writing, I think Stevenson has ever done, where, like, he's written tons of, like, great characters, but it's almost as if you condense, like, the entire story of Bobby Shafto into, like, a half chapter short story, and then that was the setup for your character. Now you have a whole book with that character. It's like, it's incredible.
Yeah. One thing that I kept noticing throughout the whole book, and I don't know, maybe Stevenson's always been really good at this, and I'm just finally mature enough to recognize it, or maybe this is something he's gotten better at, but I feel like his dialogue scenes are just next level in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of in hand with how these are more characters than usual. Like characters are speaking as if they are characters instead of the sort of a shape rotator.
Yeah.
Still Stevenson characters talking to each other about the plot in
these are all just
a high decoupling way.
Yeah, these are all just mega nerds talking to each other. Yeah.
Because like like we didn't even talk about like Willem and like that entire plot line. Like there's a lot of people that are not super nerds in this story. That actually serve like Willem, pretty key plot functions.
Willem's such a great character too. Yeah, I kind of forgot about him because he doesn't have nearly as much page space as the others, but he's definitely fully realized as well.
Yeah,
love that guy. Let's see. Okay, then there's Lax, who this is like you can always tell what happened when Stevenson was writing a book, because you can just imagine him stumbling upon the idea of the line of actual control, and then like this percolating in his mind and mixing around with ideas about like YouTube stars and coming up with the idea of like, what if India and China decide that they're not going to have any lethal warfare on their contested border, which is actually a real thing, by the way. But they're going to have non-lethal martial arts combat warfare, and then people, because of YouTube and because of drone cameras, this becomes a whole genre of entertainment. It's an esport.
It's an esport. It's basically
the Chinese versus Indian martial artists go to the line of actual control and fight each other in gangs with convoluted military support that it can't ever be explicit. And it's like this. It's funny because as much as I just said that like the Rufus part was my favorite, like this was the part that most reminded me of Snow Crash. Where I was like, oh, this could like be in Snow Crash. This could be like contemporary with Snow Crash, you know?
Yeah, I mean and it's like it's real. Yeah. It's like this entire notion of like performative war being that like you can't like have actual battles anymore because of like nukes. So you just have these performative battles to kind of try to win the kind of popular opinion as the primary means of how anything actually is resolved, up until the point that it becomes too real. Like that's just, this feels like exactly the sort of future we're rolling into. I say on the eve of Russia amassing forces on the Ukrainian border, but still.
Well, that's exactly what happens in the story. Is Lax is too successful as a guy who kicks people's asses, and so they fry his brain with a microwave gun. Which is like the perfect thing, right? It's like, it's not even they don't even shoot him. They shoot him with a future tech weapon. Just to kind of show that like, no, we're not actually going to let you win. Like this, like you were never actually going to like win the war by punching. You misunderstood, you know. And then he gets turned into Cyberlax, which is even more Snow Crash.
I feel like this whole, it's sort of like a weird commentary, because it's like, is the statement that like, you know, the vast majority of what people will see is the sort of the performative war part, where that's the thing that's like sort of easily propagandized. But when there are like real stakes, then like I'm struggling with like the thing that is actually being communicated here, because I think the read is that the performative war never mattered. It was just sort of like a way of kind of holding things in stasis, and then if that sort of what's the word? If that sort of like stalemate ever got to a point where it, like either superpower was actually threatened, then they would just kind of dispense with the farce of it all and like actually just pull the trigger.
Well, there's like a million different ways to think about these things. I mean, I see the framing of the story is that China and India are basically the world superpowers, and America is a failed state. And so China and India have this like brinksmanship thing going on, where they, in order to like project the image of their world power status, which both countries are obsessed with, just like all countries are kind of obsessed with that, they have to have these contests, and they have to be seen as, you know, strong in context of these contests. But both countries know, or at least the leadership of both countries know, that the contests are for PR. But which doesn't mean they don't matter, because PR does matter. But also it doesn't mean you're going to conquer a piece of China with the
like the moment you actually come into anywhere close to conquering a piece of China is when the gloves come off, and your brain is fried with a microwave weapon.
So
which I think makes Lack's story entirely more tragic, because it's like, here's this kid who like desperately wants to like make contact with his heritage, and then becomes a PR pawn for India, and then has his brain fried by China, and then is turned into a walking cyber weapon by India. It's just it's nuts.
Lax's story is super sad, actually. because he is indeed a poor young man who just wants to matter and is basically, as you said, in an attempt to connect with his roots, is tricked into a sort of like reactionary interpretation of what connecting with your roots means that preys on his desire to like be masculine and be important, and manipulated into, you know, being a useful idiot for a regime which has nothing to do with his heritage. Like the Indian
right.
the Indian government has nothing to do with the Punjab culture that he wanted to connect with, and the battle over the line of actual control has nothing to do with the Punjab culture which he wanted to connect with. He's tricked and bamboozled, and
right, like the original inciting thing is he just like once he was just like fighting. He was doing the awesome Sikh martial arts he like went to India to do it, and then he was like too good at it because he had a tremendous amount of training in it, and they just kept kicking him out to other places, to like some other master to learn more, until he just kind of percolated to the line of actual control and then was noticed. Like it's almost like I can't even pick out where this went wrong, really. It's like it just ended up being terrible.
I feel like this is how like funnels of like radicalizing young men into making stupid decisions actually work, and that's what I liked about it. Is there's not really a point where like a manipulative older man, you know, tricks him. It's all just the world presents to you these opportunities, and
it's a gradient of like I can become better at my martial arts, and I can connect more with my roots, and then suddenly you're in the mountains fighting Chinese.
This seems like the thing to do, he said. Then like you said, he gets cybernetically upgraded and then used as a weapon against the United States, and that's the point. Like that's the point of the story, where actually, like, I think his uncle is like, "What are you doing? This has nothing to do with anything." But he goes through with it anyway. I mean, I forget.
And you can't even fault him for it either. It's like, here's this kid who has elevated to a national hero of India, and now he's anointed to go on the secret mission, which is of geopolitical importance to India, mind you. It's just that, like, why is this kid here doing this? This is a metaphor.
That's like the worst / funniest part is India was going to do this operation. They don't need lax to do the operation. They
not at all.
They're just, it's literally just like, well, everybody loves him, and this is going to play really well on TV, and let's give him a backpack full of like thorium or whatever it is, and not tell him, which is just like, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, seriously? Well, maybe they did tell him. I don't remember, but
no, he knew like nothing. He knew like absolutely nothing about anything.
I think
about
the most Stephenson aspect of the whole thing, which by the way I saw coming because they mention that there are snakes and that you should wear boots, was when he's like finally beginning to reflect on the absurdity of the situation, and is bit by a Western Diamondback rattlesnake, and you're like, and like at that point I was like, okay, he's gonna die. This is a sign that this is the book telling us that he has gotten into something that he didn't understand, and probably was already deeply into something he didn't understand, but it has finally caught up with him. Also he's probably going to die of a snake bite anyway. So Rufus shooting him didn't really matter.
Yeah, but still, it is the actual tragedy of the story. And I do wonder if this is like Stephenson trying to say something about like just the way the world turns young people into the way the world radicalizes young people. But I don't know. I don't know if he's ever that explicit with his.
I mean, just the way that a young person can get swept up into things, maybe more directly. I mean, it's funny if you think about it. A lot of his books are about like mob psychology and, you know, the way in which having a lot of poor and directionless young men is like the most dangerous thing possible for your society. Like, it happens in Snow Crash, it happens in the Diamond Age, it happens in Kryptonomicon. Probably more that I'm not thinking about. I mean, I think he does have ideas about, like, it's people, not just young men. It tends to be young men, but people are so desperate to matter that they'll do dumb things. And
yeah, I mean, I don't. Again, I'm like drawn back to the, like, was there an off ramp for Lax at any point along this path that was, like, more compelling than the escalation before him? And I guess the conversation with his uncle or whatever, where a more storied Lax could kind of sit back and look at his world. But it's sort of like, I can hardly blame him for every choice that he made along his path towards kind of self-destruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's sort of one of our common refrains on this show, is just about how, like, kind of get eaten by incineragradients. Mm-hmm. And that this is one kind of really good example of geopolitical forces constructing gradients in a way that leads to a young man's doom.
Yeah, and I mean, as you say, a more experienced man might have hesitated, but the point is that he is not an experienced man. He's I don't remember how old he's supposed to be, actually, but he's a very young man, and he doesn't know any better. And this is actually realistic. The world is not fair. Many young men are not given a second chance. And yeah, so that's very tragic. There's kind of a lot of sadness in the book. I think most Stephenson books are kind of more fun, and this book is very fun too. But there's a lot of, like, in the end, it's a tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you needed no clearer signal of this, just that entire scene where Saskia goes to the beach and it's just like foam has killed hundreds of people.
Yeah.
It's like this is what kind of story this is. It's like we're dealing with the inscrutable and awesome forces of nature that are out of any single person's control.
The funny thing about the foam event was I kept waiting for it to be revealed that, like, the foam was actually a Chinese plot, because everything else in the book is a Chinese plot, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we're supposed to subtextually infer that the foam was a Chinese plot. Or I mean, probably. I think my first thought was like, oh no, is this some side effect of what the sulfate, the sulfur dioxide cannon is doing? No, it wasn't. It was just random. Just there was foam. There was a foam disaster, which I guess is a thing that's possible to happen, probably.
Yeah. Yes.
We haven't talked at all about the geoengineering or the sci-fi elements at all. It's
yeah. I actually went into this is another. I mean, to repeat your complaint about dust jacket covers. Like, I basically never read those when reading Stevenson books, because I don't want to know what it's about. I want it to be organically revealed what the story is about. So I actually didn't know that's what the story was about. And I was like, I saw that that's where it was going, but it was kind of a surprise. It wasn't a surprise because it's heavily lampshaded that this is what's going on in the story. But it was a nice, like, it's a good buildup. The story builds up very. It's great. Yeah. Like, the entire arc of Saskia being introduced to, like, this TR character and, like, going to his ranch and then, like, getting flown around in little bubbles. In little electric drone bubbles that show them the, like, Southeast Texas floodplains,
and just Houston, just showing them Houston.
And
this is the first book that I've read that's acknowledged that Houston is like a marvel, which it is. Yeah, I don't know if you've been to Houston,
a massive sprawling suburban metroplex.
I don't know when the last time was that you drove through Houston at night, but I was like, this is just Blade Runner. This is just a scene from Blade Runner. If the cars were flying, this would be Blade Runner. But anyway, it really. I mean, God, I said King. See, the thing is that his name is Stevenson, and my brain connects Stephen King and Neal
Oh,
Stephenson.
geez.
Stephenson. He's really good at expressing the scale of things that normally aren't appreciated. So like talking about the scale of energy and the scale of climate change and the scale of, you know, the amount of raw material they have to harvest from this giant mountain in Papua New Guinea. And just just the scale of stuff. It's kind of a beautiful, I don't know. I love that part of the book overall. The scale of the hog, the feral hog problem in the United States. It's like, it's all true too, by the way.
Yes, they're horrible. They're horrible to the ground. They chew it up. They're a pest.
So the whole geoengineering thing is interesting. So you saw him speak about this book, right? Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, this is a good time to talk about. So yeah, I went to one of these little. I mean, I think it was just kind of okay. Backing up, I have seen him talk about his books in the past. Previously, this looks something like he reads a passage from the book, and everyone chortles at the appropriate time, and then he does like an audience Q&A, and then he like signs books and leaves. This time, it was much more him just giving a presentation about climate change. And he brought up, you know, like how sulfur dioxide has been ejected into the atmosphere in like basically geoengineering amounts by volcanoes in the past. And he talked about like the effect of this, and he talked about how like, you know, the actual scale of what kind of civilizational operation you would need to extract the appropriate amount of CO2 from the atmosphere to actually make a dent in climate change as it exists now. And it was really the entire arc of the talk was like, I don't, it's not that this book or even the talk was Stephenson trying to like justify geoengineering. It was more like a him laying down the cards where the cards read, this is going to happen. like some nation state is going to do this, because if we don't, we're all going to die.
Maybe he did say that. I mean, the takeaway I get from the book is, if we don't, things are just going to keep getting worse and worse until somebody cries uncle. And then that, whatever geopolitical actor that is, they'll start doing it. And then once a certain kind of seal is broken and it becomes a thing that people do, then it'll be a thing that people do. Again, this is my reading from the book.
Yeah.
Maybe he said something slightly different in the presentation.
Yeah. I mean, he's never that like super textual. I think. I mean, it was very much a like, this is the scale of the problem ahead of us. Even if we do geoengineering things, that really just buys us time, and until we can actually extract CO2 from the atmosphere at the rate we need to, which itself is an interesting and extremely difficult geoengineering problem that we absolutely don't have time to do without something like this kind of sulfur dioxide geoengineering in the first place.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Did he have any? Yeah. I don't know. Was there anything surprising, like beyond just what was in the book, I guess?
I don't think it was. No, I mean it was very much just kind of like a high level look at history, and like, nothing super surprising.
Okay, that's cool. I think those slides are online actually.
I think
so. People can watch the actual presentation on YouTube, I believe. I guess just, you know, for posterity, just to mention, like, the idea is, you know, in the book, the guy builds basically the world's largest gun, which is really just a long tube pointed at the sky, which is loaded with vessels containing this sulfur compound, which is so the vessels are fired up into the stratosphere, and then they burn in a very particular way that kind of keeps them propelled and also fills the stratosphere with sulfur dioxide, and then they coast down to the ground and get caught and then get refilled and relaunched. And this is just something that they're basically doing all day, every day. And then there's the additional point that, like, they, you know, I found this to be very persuasive of Stephenson, actually, when he says, you know, we have he shows this is part of the billionaire's sales pitch, is that he has a train car full of coal, and then he has like like what is it, like a thimbleful of sulfur dioxide, like some really tiny amount of sulfur dioxide, and he's like, this much sulfur dioxide counteracts the CO2 produced by that much coal, and so just by doing this all day, he's like, even this one single project is able to meaningfully influence the climate. And I assume Stephenson did his homework, and that's correct. I
think it was correct. I mean, like, single volcano eruptions have like altered the climate on the order of like decades. So like, I think that's.
But still, a volcano eruption is not necessarily something that I think like, oh yeah, a person could do that. Whereas a wealthy person, and certainly a nation state, could build a big gun that shoots canisters of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere.
Yeah. And then I guess we didn't actually spell this out, but like the result of doing this from a particular location then has sort of anisotropic effects over the rest of the Earth. So like, depending on where you do this, you will cause favorable changes in some places and maybe unfavorable changes in others. So like, for example, this is doing it in the way that TR is doing it in the book is favorable for like the Netherlands and Venice, but it like delays the monsoon, or is predicted to delay the monsoon in India, which is why India doesn't want this operation to proceed. So this is the actual.
And China does want it to proceed because China doesn't like India, and then
exactly.
So it kind of highlights the potential for use basically in conflict. But I mean, ultimately, it's funny because ultimately, I think where the book comes down on it is like, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you can design a dispersal pattern where no country is harmed. At least that was the implication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was the implication, but it might have been like this is technologically possible, but politically difficult, because there are even in a world, I can imagine a world in which like China is doing this and it's politically infeasible in the US.
Well, so I almost see it as a kind of judo thing, because TR built it in South Texas because that's where he could get away with it, and then the Netherworld people built their own in like, I'm really bad at like Central Europe country names, but like somewhere off the Mediterranean, because they had like ancestral land and authority there, and it wasn't, and so neither of these locations were chosen because they were ideal dispersal sites. They were chosen because they could get away with building it there and nobody could stop them. And then once you've done that, again, it's sort of a breaking the seal thing. Once you've done that, now like India and China and the US are like, well, we have to like shape this thing that's happening, and then there's I think then the political will to do that, or at least the political will against that, dries up, and then you can conceive of a project like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
we'll see.
It depends. I'm we'll see. I really like the picture of the future that Stephenson paints, where the US is just completely incapable of doing anything, and it's just like,
it's funny because it's totally consistent with Snow Crash, but like for totally different reasons. Like, he's not saying cryptocurrency made it so that nobody could collect taxes and thus the federal government collapsed, which is what happened in Snow Crash. He's basically just saying like, we just became really sclerotic and couldn't do shit anymore. Like, we just lost the ability to do things because of
history happened to the US like it often does to whatever the leading superpower.
The empire became overburdened by its whatever, which is political commentary, folks. So I did like all of the I liked all of the political dialogue, political intrigue scenes more than I usually do. Like, I think it's like I've liked pretty much all of Stevenson's books, and I remember even liking like in the Baroque cycle, there's a lot of parts of the Baroque cycle where it's like an incredibly long incredibly nerdy conversation between, you know, two English Enlightenment figures or whatever, and it's very dry, although usually it's also pretty witty. Like he's always been a witty writer. But I feel like there's just more. I think it's what you said a minute ago. Like the political dialogue is laden with character, and you know, the character who's saying it, they're not just saying this as like a plot agent. They're saying this as, well, this is this person, and she has, you know, she feels this way about this, and so she's upset by what you just said. You know, and it all just works a lot. Like I feel like it's just another notch above the already high quality of his like ability to write intellectually stimulating and engaging dialogue scenes.
Yeah, like in particular, I loved the Chinese intelligence agent that just kept like coincidentally bumping into Willem, and just like, you know, just being put in exactly the right place to bump into him, and influencing him, and then just like trying to get, I don't know, I loved that. I'm glad that we had the full spectrum of like characters representing every view on the story, because it made it clear what Stevenson was trying to do here, I think, which was like tell a story about how people would actually react on Earth to this sort of thing happening. And it's not like there's a winner and a loser. It's like these are people,
and everybody's trying to protect their own best interests as they would. I did find the cavitation bombing thing to be quite terrifying and evil.
So I don't know, I felt like at the time I was like, are we supposed to think that this actually was I think we are. I think I'm just dense, and that this was like definitely China that caused the tsunami that destroyed the bridge. But at the same time, it's like he spent like a lot of time talking about how like China also could just like know ahead of time because they have the compute to know. So I was like, is this like running interference on the idea? I thought
honestly, I thought there was a specific part where they said, you know, hey, did you detect? Okay, so the idea is there's this gigantic dike that's holding back the entire North Atlantic from drowning the Netherlands. And during a storm, that situation gets even worse. And allegedly, China does this thing where they set like a large number of very small bombs dropped into the water that, when detonated at exactly the right timing, cause a basically focused shockwave hammer that smashes through the dam in a way where it just looks like the water just smashed through the dam spontaneously, of course, because that's basically what happened. But because you can't find any of the bomb remains because it's a bunch of small bombs over a large area. But I thought there was a part where like English intelligence or whatever was like, yes, our, you know, nautical microphones detected exactly the distributions of small explosions that you would expect to see.
Yeah, see, I thought it was like them saying if you looked you would probably find them, and not that they actually had the hard, like I thought there was some amount of ambiguity here, that it was like maybe China just saw it coming, or but I
kind of agree with
like,
well, okay, I'm pretty sure that it was supposed to be China that did it, but also I agree that I'm confused because it didn't seem like that was a thing that the Chinese operative would have done.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if only to like further swing political opinion in favor of geoengineering, because it's like, here, these giant waves, they're coming. You got to stop those freak climate events.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you are supposed to think that the Chinese did it. It seemed like an out of character thing to do, and also like super risky, because like, yeah, you probably could like figure out that that's what happened, and then it's like, wait a minute, did China just basically nuke the Netherlands to make a point? I don't know about that.
It seems very risky. I don't know.
Very, very fun. I guess that the Earth suits is the other thing that's worth talking about, because
Oh yeah, just because it's basically will
because
kill
it
you
will
to be
kill
outside.
you to be outside because of the wet bulb temperature, I guess, and how that's totally going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Like one day you're going to be walking around and you're going to see somebody wearing like, you know, some kind of like water cooled vest outdoors, and it's going to be like, this is it, it's beginning, and it's gonna get more and more.
Yeah. Yeah. I also really enjoyed Stevenson's sort of like vision of a technological solution to COVID variants, which I think we're entering a different world line at this point. Like, though I guess we can't actually know that yet, but it seems, knock on wood, but it seems like that's not the world we're going to be in, and it seems like people would actually would be resistant to that sort of technological solution. But I don't know. I found it like the whole thing where like you go into a house and then you like immediately know that who you need to avoid and like where people have been, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember that. I feel like we're definitely not in the world line where everybody just agrees to share their location tracking data all the time. That ship sailed.
Yeah, this was an early COVID book.
This is an early COVID book when it seemed like there might be technological solutions of any kind beyond just an extremely rapidly created vaccine.
Yeah.
Which
guess we'll see.
Yeah, I forgot about that element actually.
It almost I meant to like ask this as a question during the talk I went to, but it was like, how much of this did you rewrite because of COVID? Because it's like it's not central to the story, but it is. It shows up in every scene where like characters are, you know, visiting somewhere and interacting with folks, and it's like, it integrates very cleanly, and it's just
it felt, you know, I think it didn't even occur to me while reading that he might have had to like rethink some things. I mean, he could have just left it out entirely and it would have been fine, but it's always fun to watch him think through something. I'm just trying to go through all the cool technology things, like so I'm trying to remember how this worked, and I must need to reread it or something, because so remember when the Chinese are landing in Papua New Guinea and they've got these like, what is it exactly? Is it like a drone landing craft thing that they have?
I thought they just like ziplined in from like tens of thousands of feet up.
It's something ridiculous like that. I thought there were drones and all that. I thought it was like they're ziplining down from little drone ships or something like that. I don't remember, but it was like
that, but basically they just appear out of nowhere, and suddenly there's just
there's just troops, like a full scale invasion force, and they all land like at exactly the same time. So there's just there's not even any ability to prepare. That was a thing that could probably exist also.
Yep. And I love the deepfake Saskia resignation ×2. That was just
we have to, okay, let's talk about that. That was like my favorite part. Not my favorite part, but like that was the part where I just kept thinking, because he writes it so cleverly, where like there's like one deepfake thing that happens, and then like as they're preparing the response to it, there's like a second deepfake like outflanking the thing that they were about to do.
Yeah, exactly. This is beautiful. Almost too clever. Almost too clever for any single actor to actually pull off.
That's why fiction is fun.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's funny is you imagine like, oh, if only people were this competent to actually pull something like this off, because we totally have the technology to do deepfakes. It's really just like the timing and the sort of like rope-a-dope strategy of getting Saskia in that position so elegantly. Nobody ever like behaves that deterministically, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm in this smaller camp of people that feel like very little will change because of the existence of things like deepfakes. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's. I haven't actually heard a compelling case for how a world in which it's possible to like perfectly synthesize this stuff would like actually change truth norms or contribute to some kind of like great faking of information problem, because I already kind of feel like that's already happening all the time, and we don't even need. This is just making me sound like a crazy person. I don't feel like being able to fake video is the thing that allows like information currents to be controlled by people that deal in information. I think that's extremely secondary to the whole information management pipeline.
Weird. Yeah, no, I mean, I think like it's actually hard to imagine a scenario where if a deepfake event were to happen, someone could just be like, "Yeah, it was a deepfake," and then have it just be accepted. Now the flip side of that, I think this actually kind of touches on like the it touches on the what happens in the previous book, Fall, where the entire country / world just divides into two completely separate information ecologies, where if you say it's a deep fake, then if you're on that side of the line, then you say, yeah, it was definitely a deep fake. And if you're on the other side of the line, you say it wasn't a deep fake, he's lying to try to get out of it. And that just becomes the truth as far as that whole entire side is concerned.
Yeah. And if I have a point, it's that already happens, and we don't need deepfakes for that to happen.
Yeah, right. I mean, what can you do with the deepfake that you can't do by just lying?
Yeah, exactly. Like people don't need video to have their priors flattered by whatever narrative they choose to believe.
Yeah, right. And also, like, it's funny because I simultaneously have pretty low like regard for, you know, the ability of the mob to filter this stuff, but also like I'm thinking about certain instances where like certain like a popular YouTuber, like they took one frame where his like arm is kind of elevated because he's gesturing, and like used that to be like Nazi sympathies, and it's like, no, like you can't do that, and like everyone rightly just absolutely pilloried them for it. Yeah, so there's a lot of but that's the thing, is that didn't work. And it
right, like I guess it's sort of a how much are you willing to fight the hypothetical kind of thing, because you can sort of smuggle in arbitrarily advanced technology and the idea of deepfakes, and at a certain point, like, it starts looking scary if you can like synthesize in real time a video of, you know, like a paid actor that's like, you know, saying things or something. Like, I don't know, you can I don't feel like that's the future we're going to have. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah I mean, I agree. Let's see, any other cool tidbits from this story that we want to talk about?
I mean, just the entire like the sort of last third where Rufus is being a drone ranger was pretty fun.
Yeah.
With his like little motley crew of misfits.
Yeah, and the the eagle, the drone hunting eagles, and
yeah.
and then I mean, that, like, again, that's just straight out of Snow Crash, where it's like you just happen to have this giant air force of drone hunting eagles, and then India attacks you primarily with drones, and then you have Rufus, the Comanche warrior, running through this crossfire of drones with eagles, which are a symbol simultaneously of Native American heritage, but also American hegemony, striking the drones out of the sky. And then he saves the largest gun in the world. It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful haiku of perfection.
Yeah. From being nuked. He saved it from being nuked.
By India. As it happens.
Yeah, I think that scene and the scene where Lax beats up the truck drivers are tied for my favorite scenes.
Talk about that scene, Daniel, because that's the other. Yes, there's so many great scenes. That's the thing. That the more we just sit here, the more the great scenes just.
Well, it's just the whole way it plays out, where it's just like Rufus and some like security dudes watching video of this happening, and it's just absolutely hilarious. With like this non-assuming Sikh just suddenly preternaturally completely destroying all of these extremely racist truck drivers.
Right.
Like it's just like it's just beautiful. It's just a beautiful little story.
With his supernatural cyber brain powers and
where he can smell danger. He can smell
danger, and he's using the squeegee pole, which just happens to be exactly like the traditional weapon that he trained with for countless hours.
Exactly. Exactly.
And he's great. He's great. I don't know, for some reason, like the funniest moment in the whole story for me was like you get this sense of Lax as like kind of a big, I don't want to say dumb, but just like a big, very direct and kind of practical person. And then it isn't until you're like hundreds of pages into his story that you get a third person look at him and he's like a stunning Adonis of physical perfection. He's just like totally ripped and just beautiful.
Yeah. It's just not part of his inner monologue at all.
He's unaware
just
of it.
Like, I'm Lax. I'm trying to connect with my roots. He doesn't have
he has no idea. And like when one of the girls is attracted to him, it's just like a totally novel like concept to him. Yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic.
What a delightful character.
Oh yeah, just a really fun. I mean, that's what's great is it's simultaneously really fun, but it's also got just the right amount of drama and sadness peppered throughout it to make it land and be memorable. You know, this is one thing I've kind of realized is like there's a lot of stuff that I really enjoy. Like this happens with movies a lot where I'll be like, oh, that was really fun. And then I like walk out of the theater and never think about the movie again. It's just not memorable to me. And I realize like it's important that things be fun, but also if there's not a little bit of tragedy or just an emotion other than like, haha, that was cool. Then you're just not going to remember it. It's not going to stick with you. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. And this story managed to be very fun and also managed to matter. I think that's why it reminds me of Kryptonomicon, is because Kryptonomicon is one of the only other books of Stevenson's where it has some real tragedy to it, actually.
And I feel like you spend enough time with characters that are character enough. Like, I don't know, they're just excellent examples of Stevenson characters that like you can deeply empathize with them throughout their journeys. Whereas there are definitely Stevenson characters like we talked about before, where it's just like this is a mouthpiece for the cool ideas of the story, and that's okay.
Yeah,
but to actually connect on the hitting you in the gut level, you have to actually have those little empathy neurons firing, which requires different techniques.
You gotta have the man's little toddler daughter be eaten by wild pigs.
By a specific enormous
white whale wild pig. It's
Jesus Christ.
It's just the right amount of horrible too, because he could have made it way worse, right? Like he it's in the story and he doesn't shy away from it, but it doesn't turn into like this is a super depressing story.
It's not trying to be a depressing story.
It's definitely not. But I'm not like, it's sad. Like he spends quite a bit of time talking about exactly what happened, exactly how Rufus reacted to it, and how his marriage dissolved and he became crazy for a while, and now he has this tick permanently where he'll stretch out his mouth and stick out his tongue randomly. It's which I'm not really sure what that's supposed to look like, by the way, but that's okay. It's a book. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter. It's about Rufus healing.
It is.
It's Rufus's long adventure to heal.
Rufus healing and getting to bang a queen.
Yeah. Also, best romance of any story ever.
Absolutely. That's great. Um, yeah, I feel like we haven't talked about Saskia as much, and I think that's because her function is a lot more plotty and okay, you have to fly here and do this, and also like a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
the
yeah.
stuff, and like her and Willem sort of like share story functions.
Yeah, because like you can't have Saskia literally go to every single, like she can't be in Indonesia and like the
Yeah,
Netherlands simultaneously,
and
and
Venice,
like
and yeah,
in Venice. Yeah,
yeah. So like it's funny because I was going to talk about the scene where they're in Papua New Guinea, and I was like, oh wait, that's not even Saskia. That's Willem.
yeah. It's just Willem
Yeah,
in a firefight, not
yeah, yeah.
not Saskia.
It's it's fun though. I think Stevenson understands that it's just fun to read about like jet setting people doing jet setting things. Like that's just
Mm-hmm.
it just is. So we spend some time
Yeah,
with Saskia and visiting.
yeah. No, it's a no. We should talk about this because it's a like delightful slice of what living like a queen in the modern era
Yeah.
actually looks like, and it's
Uh-huh.
ridiculous. It's like a caricature of like real life, and it's all entirely performative. Yet at the same time, her family still owns like broad swaths of like huge controlling stakes in like
Yeah.
enormous
In
like
in
nation
Shell.
oil
Yeah.
companies. Yeah, and like being gifted a hydrogen powered plane by a prince of Saudi Arabia
Yeah.
just because like it's just insane.
It's a
It's great.
fantastic. I think the whole book is saying very interesting things about power and theater because you know the line of actual control is a theatrical war with no real or the stakes are not actually the battle over the line of control. The stakes are the battle over public opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
Saskia is a is the exact kind of European queen where she has no real political power. Like I think her political function is to like read a speech at a certain point in time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but she is a powerful focus of like attention and um I recently came across this distinction between power and authority, where authority is described as the ability to say what the right thing to do is, and power is the ability to make that happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like in various eras of history, for example, the church has had all of the authority, but has not actually had the power. It was in the hands of others to actually execute that authority. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in this particular case, you know, Saskia doesn't really have power, but she can use her authority to make things happen. And so it's just this fantastic study of the power of theater and I guess what you could also call soft power. But I kind of like this power authority distinction now that I've become aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was interesting. And I think sort of like comparing and contrasting her existence with TR's existence is also interesting because there's something very deeply Stevensonian about the idea of like billionaires as an extension of the aristocracy of Europe or as like the modern
Mm-hmm.
incarnation of it, I should say. It's not an extension because it's a
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
different
yeah,
group of human beings with totally different
yeah.
sources of wealth. Um, but like comparing and contrasting like what who TR is, how TR lives, what he can do and what he can't do, and you know, he's almost the opposite. Like he has all of the power, no of the and none of the authority. You know, no one.
Mm-hmm.
He has not won any hearts and minds, and no one listens to him except for the fact that he just pays people to build a giant gun in the middle of the desert
and and then
and then
fires it
fires it, and
repeatedly.
then nobody can stop
Yeah.
him, and that's how he gets his power. But like nobody agrees with him that it was a good idea. So
Yeah.
which is incidentally why he wanted to enlist Saskia's help. He wanted her authority. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's the it's important to have the soft power. It's important to have the buy-in from the people who actually can sway public opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love all of that. That's great, and I 100% agree. Um, Billionaires feature in a lot of Stevenson novels as actors.
Increasingly lately,
Like,
but yeah.
Like I mean, just Dodge
Yeah.
in Reamdy and Fall, and Elon Musk in Seven Eves,
Wait.
and I don't remember his name, but
either.
he's just
Elon Musk. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, again, when you go back to, the Broke cycle, for example, it's all about these kings and lords and I think he's really interested in like human societies and how we tend to concentrate all the power in the hands of a small number of people, and then very often the idiosyncrasies of those people end up disproportionately driving historical events.
Yeah. And it's definitely not like a moralizing thing. It's more of like this is actually what happens,
just kind of
thing.
Keeps happening. Just kind of always has happened. Yeah. And
I'm not even really sure there's I think Stevenson is like extremely ambivalent about the like the morality of that particular idea, and is much more interested in just interrogating the consequences of it.
Yeah.
And it just you get these crazy situations where power is concentrated in individuals, and that drives everything.
Yeah. I've always said he's like Heinlein, where he's not ideological, he's curious, and he likes to create interesting situations and be like, how would this actually be, and how would this go if you took this idea seriously? Like that's like this is the fun thing about Snow Crash, is it's like, oh, Snow Crash is about an anarchic total breakdown of society. That must mean that he's an anarchist. It's like, no, it doesn't. It just means that he was making the exercise of taking seriously the way a country would look after it had broken down into anarchy.
Yeah. I'm not like, how can you read Snow Crash and then read the Diamond Age and then think that that's what the story to learn from Snow Crash?
Most people read the Diamond Age and then they think, he believes that monarchy is the way to go, and
he's a near reactionist.
Yeah, and
I said it. Oh god, we have to bleep it
again. But no, he's.
Oh, I said neo-reactionist.
Oh,
I didn't actually say the right word.
That's
so
good.
It's okay. We don't have to.
But it's just people need to stop thinking that everything agrees with them or should agree with them, because it's silly. Just it's silly.
It's war, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but are you the Chinese operative, or are you lax in this war? Is the question.
that is
because I think we're all lax. I think
we're all.
If there's a point here,
until I'm a billionaire.
Yeah, right. And then you're TR.
Yeah. Who's the Saskia? I need to rub elbows with European monarchs.
Yeah. Actually, I don't really want to do that.
That's the real lesson of Termination Shock, is everyone should go to Monaco and try to befriend European.
It can't hurt.
So that it can't hurt.
All right. Well, anyway, the Doof Media official position on geoengineering is yes.
Just do it.
Just do it. Just do it. Just start doing it. Where's the gun?
Fire it 6 times an hour.
Yeehaw. Yes. Get the gun. Build the gun. I'm a Texan. You can tell. Definitely build the gun. All right. Is he serious? Who knows? All right, everybody. Are we done, Daniel? Do you have any other thoughts?
What could he mean? No, I don't think I have any. This is a great book. Everyone should read this book.
Yes.
I don't think this book is going to have a sequel. It wasn't really set up for it. It's a great little standalone novel. If you weren't already completely spoiled by us. Yeah,
I didn't detect any Stevenson MCU connections to the greater.
Yeah,
I don't think Enoch shows up in this book,
no,
etc. So no, I think this is just a near future Our Actual World book. So All right, well, thanks, Daniel. That was fun. Thanks for getting the early copy of the book. I'm glad we had a good half year to just kind of ruminate on it. I'm sure that improved the quality of this discussion.
Yeah, I actually probably, I mean, it definitely gave us time to like decide if we really enjoyed it. And
that's true. That is a good point, because I honestly don't think I had really digested Fall when we talked about it. I was just like, there's all these things. But I had time to think about how all this fit together. So, all right. Thanks, Daniel. And we will see you all next month.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.